Grace, mercy, and peace be unto you from God, who is Creator, Christ, and Comforter. Amen. Well, what would you do if you had nothing left to lose? What would you do if all of your options were gone and there was no thing, no one, no place, no purpose left for you and your life? Where would you go? Who would you want to be with or talk to? Why the woman from our gospel story, this poor widow, would come to the temple, I have to tell you, it's beyond me. Being a woman of the Jewish faith and tradition, she had to know the stories from her scriptures. Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah, and the widow of Zarephath, who took care of Elijah, whom God blessed when they gave their all. Is that what she expected when she put her 2 coins into the temple treasury? Did she hope against hope that the temple would be her place of refuge and rescue? Did she expect God to bless her when she gave everything she had? Where was her family? Where were her friends? Who even noticed her? And who cared one little bit about her plight as all those other people dumped their money from their excess and she gave all she had? Well, Jesus did. Jesus noticed her. Jesus saw her and he spoke to her. No, he didn't. He spoke about her. He spoke about her giving the last of everything that she owned to the temple treasury. Why would Jesus point out this woman who had already been exploited by society and suffered so much loss? The loss of her husband and her family and her friends. This story has always struck me as odd, oddly placed and oddly out of place. Jesus had just finished getting off on the scribes. And as you recall, those scribes, they were the people of the educated class, professorial types, who appear pious and wise and expect to sit in places of honor at banquets. And they do nothing. Nothing for those who are poor and vulnerable, but actually they enrich themselves from their losses. Because what a scribe would do, they would go up to a poor person and say, "Tomorrow I'm eating at your house." Well, that's nice. So that poor person then would beg, borrow, and steal everything they could to put a nice dinner in front of the scribe, who of course could go home and have a very lavish dinner on his own, but chose to eat in poor people's houses at their dime. So you see, ticking off the scribes is probably not a good thing to do if you want to live a long and prosperous life. But then after Jesus scolds the scribes, comes this scene at the treasury. And then to top it all off, the next scene in the book of Mark tells us that Jesus and his disciples leave the temple and they're admiring the beautiful space. And Jesus tells them that soon all these gorgeous stones and these marvelous edifices are going to be destroyed. So not only is this story's placement odd, but I don't know about you, I want it to be different. I want Jesus to take this woman up in his arms and tell her that everything is going to be okay. I want Jesus to have a conversation with this woman. Maybe we'd actually get to know her name. I want Jesus to give her enough money to live comfortably for the rest of her days, or at least welcome her into his little band of men and women so she could have companionship and daily bread. But it seems to me that Jesus just points to her as she goes on her way out the door to die. Actually, come to think of it, Jesus points to her because of those scribes who are probably listening in. And you see, Jesus already knows their hypocrisy. He just said to them, "You who devour widows' houses." Maybe then he's looking at them and pointing to her. You who devour widows' houses. Well, was Jesus just pointing out their hypocrisy? Or is he pointing to our hypocrisy as well? The scribes' problem, it seems to me, is that they were more concerned with what they had than with what the needs of those around them were. They brought into the notion that primary measure of their well-being, which was whether they were better off than they were before. Sound familiar? What do we do with what we have so generously been given? God did not set up society to be a place where we think of our own needs first, last, and only. The 10 Commandments were given to us by God to help us take care of each other. They seem kind of difficult, those 10 Commandments, when we think of what they require of us, until we realize that they also require the same thing of our neighbor. And then it all begins to make sense. We are not isolated individuals. We are a community. We are a group of people who are gathered and bound by mutual need and caring. So, Jesus looks at this widow, and his voice is a voice of lament. Jesus' voice is filled with sadness because the very system that's supposed to care for the stranger in our midst, the orphan and the widow, uses them up instead. No one was this woman's community. So I have a question for you tonight. What would Jesus see if he sat by our treasury? What will Jesus see as he sits by you as the offering plate is passed? Will he see a people who are generous? Or would he see people who toss him some extra cash from their excess? Oh, I know. It's so easy to be seduced into thinking that what our society tells us and advertising is the way it has to be. Look out for number one. You need this. You need this, and you need it now. Buy this, do this, join this, and you'll be happy, healthy, thin, beautiful, popular, more masculine, more feminine, more loved and beloved. Take care of you and yours. And who cares about them? Jesus does. Jesus cares about them. And he also knows that the troubles of our society are not just individual, they are corporate. So I wonder what Jesus will be saying as we, the governing board, the steering committee of Living Faith, meet this week, as we sit down together and look over the budget and expenses for this place. Does what we do with what you have been so generous with reflect God's design for our society? Or are we just taking care of us and ours and not thinking about the stranger in our midst, or the widow, or the orphan? If the widow of today's lesson could tell us anything, if her voice could be heard through all the ages that have passed, I wonder what she would say to us. What do you hear? Amen.